I'm Matt Long, and this is Infants on Thrones, philosophy mingled with story. And on this episode, Tom Perry and I sit down and talk about our approaches to parenting beyond Mormonism. What we've learned, what we know, what we don't know. But first, here's a little story I told a group of friends that were over the other day. The myth of reality. And the story I want to tell you is about the land of belief, where this group of people, good people, lived. We call it the land of belief because you either fell into one of two tribes, either the believers or the non-believers. And the believers, they always started by believing. And the non-believers, they would start by disbelieving. And the people I'm going to tell you about, they were in the tribe of the start by believers. This couple, they eventually were going to have a baby. And they were too young to have a baby, but that's what was going to happen. And so the thing that they always told each other, and they thought this was so clever, is they'd say, well, now it's real. And so that's what they called her. They called her Reality, their little baby. Now, Reality was born. And a few days later, as often happens, there's the local mystic comes over. And he blesses the children with gifts. And they were very excited to see what gifts Reality would be given. Because they were usually given three different gifts. Reality's mother was blessed with kindness. Was one of her gifts. Her father was blessed with wit and other things. And so they're very excited as what is Reality going to be blessed with? And the mystic came and did his little ritual thing. And he said, Reality, I bless you with awe. Awe. And her mom and dad said, awe? Like A-W-E? He said, yeah, awe, A-W-E. And he leaned down and he whispered something in Reality's ear. And this child, just a few days old, popped open her eyes. Didn't know what the mystic whispered into her, but they said, okay, your gift is awe. Seems like a silly gift. Mom got kindness and other things. Dad got wit and other things, and you get awe. So they're interested to see how this child would grow up. Well, in the land of belief, as often happens, Reality's parents realized some of the error of their ways. They saw as they started by believing, they were wrong. They were wrong. And too often when they started by believing, they were ignorant of the truth because they just started by believing. And so as they got a little older and as Reality got a little older, her parents did the obvious thing. They switched from being believers to non-believers. And so now they started to, instead of starting by believing, they became cynics. They became critics. And they would start by disbelieving. And they felt very confident in their position because now they weren't as wrong as they were when they were believers. The thing is, Reality saw this change as she got older, and she was a bit perplexed by it. She was really confused because she saw that when her parents became disbelievers, they were doing the same thing as they did when they were believers. And so Reality got a little older, and she did really well in life. She was very smart. She was very capable because she applied the gift that the mystic gave her. Eventually, her parents saw that they were still struggling. And the same problems that they had when they were believers really didn't change. They just kind of had a different flair to it. There were different people. There were different environment. There was a different accoutrement. But they were doing the same thing. And eventually, they started having a conversation with Reality because she was getting old enough now to kind of figure out her own way. And what they realized is she was different than the other kids. She was different than the other tribes. She was kind to everyone. She was smart. By that meant she asked the right questions and very rarely had answers. The questions that she had led to more questions, whereas the people who started by believing and the people who start by disbelieving usually got to an answer rather than getting to more questions. And as she got to more questions, it caused her to experience more. Eventually, her parents asked her, reality, tell me about kind of your process, how you do the things you do. And she said, well, Mom and Dad, I'm simply doing the thing you taught me to. Early on, I assume you meant it. You told me, find myself. And so I did. And I did that by utilizing the gifts that the mystic gave me. And I said, well, he gave you awe. What do you mean awe? She smiled and she said, oh, he gave me awe. AWE. Awareness, wonder, and experiences. And so throughout life, as I went around, I approached life with awareness and wonder and experience. And as I did that, and the older I got, the thing that I was able to experience was me. And I said, that's pretty fucking good. So can you give me a help on how to apply on to my life? And she said, absolutely. Because your whole life, you started by believing. And then the latter your part, you started by disbelieving. Whereas all I ever did was begin by hearing. I listen. And I evaluate. And I don't know that it's brought me good things all the time, but it's brought me things that are real. It's brought me the experiences that I want to have because they're mine. And what it's brought me is connection with my heartbeat, connection with my consciousness. And it's helped me to know how I want to move and what I want to wear and where I want to live and what I want to do and what I want to eat and who I want to be around. And it turns out when I apply awe, I'm right about me. So the charge is this: approach the world with awe, awareness, wonder, and experience. But in order to do that, I have one question. Will you begin by hearing? And so I thought about that and thought, let's have a conversation about parenting beyond Mormonism. And, as I will disclose something to you, Tom, and wash your balls at the same time.
All right, I'm prepared.
Which is, is in this life, this existence beyond Mormonism. It was simply a reminder of something that I've always feared, which is I'm all alone. And by that, I just mean that nobody has this figured out. And when that reality hit, it provided me a lot of a lot of terror to be a father in that type of a situation. And but Tom's you've been a lifeline to me in trying to navigate how to be a parent outside of some other structure or how we were brought up. And so, you've kind of been my go-to person to say, hey man, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm not saying, what you're doing, but help me, figure this out. And maybe we can figure this out together. And, it's been one of the joys over the last few years is, figuring out, or at least, experiencing this whole parenting thing, together and with someone who's helped me navigate those waters. And so that's why I reached out to you, said, let's talk about this parenting thing beyond Mormonism and some of the things we maybe reflected on, both how things have changed and maybe how things haven't changed in our approaches and our outlooks as parents.
Yeah, first off, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, the thing is, I reached out to you as well, and I love hearing Kristen's insight as well, because you guys we're both about the same age. We have kids that are similar ages, and so yeah, we're kind of working through this clusterfuck of parenting together. in a way. And, you guys have your definite struggles. I've got struggles. And yeah, it's like we learn as we go through these trial and errors. Hopefully we don't mess up our kids too badly and just pave a way for them. And that's why your guys' experiences and advice and insight as far as parenting and just being who you are as people too has been incredibly invaluable for me. So yeah, I just want to kind of throw the ball washing a little bit back at you, because it's a team effort. It's definitely not a one-sided deal. So yeah, but as far as this parenting beyond Mormonism, it's been such a key focus of my life ever since I stopped believing, obviously. And because of the position that I'm in, where Mormonism still had a vital role or a key to play in my family and with my kids until fairly recently. I'm going to say in the last 2 or 3 years, my wife has slowly started to pull more and more away from Mormonism, which has been really great. And I just, just selfishly, I want to say that's such a relief. But I'm committed to her. I'm committed to the family. So regardless of where she goes, I'm going to, allow her the space to carve her own path and journey. And I'm just going to love and support her through that, because she does the same for me, obviously.
Yeah.
She provided me all kinds of space and comfort and support as I went through my journey. So what kind of asshole would I be if I didn't do that for her?
Right. The big kind.
Yeah, right. But parenting outside of Mormonism, oh man, I don't even know where to start, really. Why don't you, first off, how old were your kids when the big shifts happened?
Yeah, the biggest shift happened right after our youngest was baptized.
Oh wow!
It was this soft kind of, I'm not attending, not doing the temple recommend thing, but not really talking about it, suffering in silence, only talking to Kristen about it. And then it was Dylan, our youngest, was just turning 8. I went and got my temple recommend for the purpose of baptizing her. We baptized her, and almost within weeks, we really were never attended as an active member since then. So Dylan was 8. Let's see, I got to do the math upwards. Tommy would have been 4 years, so he would have just been 12, and he had just passed the sacrament. He was another one. He wanted to pass the sacrament. Once he did, it was like, well, that was boring. I'm out. And so he wasn't interested in attending after that. And then Tori was 14, and she was just as happy to not be involved. So 14, young women's, just barely young men's, and then 8 when we really now we're no longer even pretending to operate under a Mormon paradigm.
Yeah, they were kind of in those like vital ages where the Mormonism programs were going to start to sink their hooks into them.
Right. And, Tori was avoidant of that. She had a second pair of earrings, for example, and was thought that was silly. That was being talked about quite frequently. But it never quite took, the programming, that level of young men's, and certainly seminary, and that never had the opportunity to take. So in many ways we were, I think we had the maximum impact on Kristen and I as far as being committed and having our kids so much in, and yet kind of just got to that area of preventing some real major corruptions taking effect in all 3 kids. But the one thing I did want to point, just highlight, is in retrospect, we realized the adoption and Tori being adopted is something that probably kept me in the church longer than it would have otherwise.
Explain that a little bit.
Well, the family that Tori's birth family were a family that I knew on my mission, and they adopted me culturally into their family while I was on their mission. And then we went back and we've told the story before, but they asked us to adopt her, and it was just clear. Well, and the story is that they knew they wanted me to adopt her, but they needed to meet Kristen first, and so they waited until they met Kristen, and then eventually asked us to take her. And in fact, but there was that understanding. I'm giving you her because one of the reasons why I'm sacrificing and I'm willing for you guys to be the family is because of the faith.
Yeah, it was like a big a contingency, right?
Right. And Randy's talked about this before in his adoption experience as well. Is that the Mormon connection is something that you when you're an adoptive family or an adoptive parent in that situation, it did. And in retrospect, it was certainly a larger factor than, or it was just a factor, I guess. And that's been something that has stuck with me and has affected me up until fairly recently. There's always been this element of, I don't know if guilt's the right word, but just it's been an itch. It's been a pea, like a pea under the mattress, the Princess and the Pea. Just a little irritating,
Yeah, sure. Yeah, well, what was my kids? So my oldest was 11, turning 12. Okay. And then my boy was getting ready to turn 8. And then we just had our youngest. Just my wife was giving birth.
Oh, wow.
To our youngest. So,
and when you say major shift, what's that look like for you?
Let's see.
Because you pinpointed those years pretty good, man.
I did, because there's this focal point that I always point to internally for me when I felt like I was no longer a believer in Mormonism. When that shift happened, and it was obviously it wasn't like just one night or whatever. It was like a build up, and then but when it did happen, when I just let that sink in, and then I just accepted that, I don't know, the inevitability, the decision, just allowing everything to just fall into place. When that happened, that was when I would go to church and everything looked different, felt different. Just the people, just everything had a new flavor and a smell and a look to it. Yeah. Just everything changed.
What a great articulation.
Because, and it's still that way in some way. I'll go attend a Mormon meeting, and it's like I have to force myself to remember what it felt like as a believer back then, because things are so shifted now.
Stranger in a strange land.
Yeah, it really does.
How am I such a stranger in a place that I once felt
like it was home, really.
Home. Yeah, right.
That I was a part of, and that this was going to be, it's wrapped up in your identity, obviously. So,
right.
But when that happened, that was when, for me, all the colors of the world changed or whatever. And so I look at my family, my immediate family, and then my parents, my siblings, and all my wife's family. That's when all the dynamics started to have ripples and everything. So that's why I look at that time as, in fact, there was one event that kind of, but I don't remember the exact date, but it was when my existing bishop and his wife, I called them to come over to the house, and I let them know. My wife and I sat there and we let them know. I think they were probably, were they the first people I talked to? I don't know. But that situation is what sort of crystallizes in my head my first coming out party. because I think I sent the email to my family and stuff like that a little around that time or a little after that. But I was so close to my former bishop and his wife, like they just crazy close to him. And it just, without even thinking, I was like, well, if this is real, if this is how it's going to be, I've got to tell them first, because I was working with them all the time. Their kids were over our house. Our kids were over their house. It was almost closer than family in a lot of ways. So I was just like, I got to let them know first, because it's going to impact them first and foremost. So,
right.
Anyway.
And then this impact do you feel that this was the shift also in your parenting style and the way that you now started operating practically in the world?
Absolutely. And, that interview that I did with my oldest daughter that I posted on Infants like a year and a half or 2 years ago or something like that, it shifted everything for me as far as being a parent. Like prior, as a believer, I felt like I knew what I needed to say, when I needed to say it, how I needed to say it, all those things. But once that dynamic shifted, it was a much scarier time. And all I really wanted to do was to just kind of hold their hands and help them get up on their own feet, rather than me tell them, these are the rules. You're going to abide by the rules. You're going to follow the rules until, whatever age or date or whatever it is, because that's kind of the structure and the format of the Mormon religion.
Yeah.
Without
benchmarks, achievements, linear growth. Right.
Yeah. Without that scaffolding there, it was really, really, really scary. And so in that interview I had with my daughter, that was the first time, like, I can still remember how scared I was, because it was a layer of vulnerability I hadn't addressed with myself or with anyone. But I went to her, and mind you, she was 11 years old or almost 12. And I was going to tell her, that I don't believe, knowing that she was going to probably judge me, because I had a pretty good idea. I mean, I'd seen her praying and she was attending all of her meetings. So I was taking this leap that she was going to, there's going to be this instantaneous wedge between us. It was really, really scary. But I was like many fresh ex-Mormons, where honesty and integrity, is the only thing is the only thing that matters. Damn everything else.
Transparency, even if it's really, really harmful. Yeah.
Even if it causes problems and wedges. Right. And I just went in there, and very, very fortunate for me, it kind of shifted my daughter in a much positive light, where we started to develop a very strong bond and trust. And, that kind of started the seeds of doubt planting in her own mind for her eventual, disaffection in her own mind, because she like any kid and any person, everyone has doubts. And do they feel safe enough to address them, talk to them? Everybody has a shelf, but is there even a place that they can talk about it?
Yeah.
And I provided that place for her. So, yeah. Anyway,
well, but hear her father basically say, "Look, I'm dealing with real stuff in life," which is essentially what you did.
Yeah,
I'm dealing with real stuff, and I want to bring you into my, really my suffering. I want
it's weird though.
Bring into my experience. It's the right word, man. What you said is vulnerability, but what awesome modeling to say, to show, look, I struggle, I'm struggling, and I want you to be a part of this experience, which happens to right now be a struggle.
But is it awesome though? Because I remember something that my daughter had said, is that you, speaking to me as her father, you represent this pillar of strength and foundation. And if you're going to approach me and say, I'm not that, I'm not this pillar, I'm not this, solid tree that you can hang on to when the wind gets strong, that I also, have problems holding on, that I also am trying to still figure out life when I'm the one trying to raise you. You know, it's a really complicated thing, because I do think that there is an obligation from a child's perspective and from a parent's perspective that a parent's got to have all their shit together. I feel that as a parent. Mm-hmm. And I know that for a child, they want their parents to have all their shit together.
Sure. But to me, that's such a Mormon, it's such a fundamentalist outlook, and it's not consistent with reality. And so in presenting that, or in wanting to be that, or her expectation of that, and your desire to be that, that was both of your desires to live in a fiction that doesn't really serve anyone, because it doesn't model when real shit happens. Sometimes there isn't a whole lot of stability. And in fact, learning that at such an early age only prepared her to deal with the realities that come her way.
No, you're right. It's just removing that mental or emotional safety net is the way I'm framing it.
Mm-hmm. But that's a healthy thing, bro.
Yeah, you want to say that it is, and I think you're right. But in the moment,
right?
Like, it's super, super terrifying for both.
Vulnerable, right? Like, this vulnerability of this thing could just dissipate. Everything could crumble over this.
Because I remember when my wife's older sister died, which was just a few years after that. Mm. And my oldest said, "So where did Aunt Lucy go?" And I said, "I have no idea. Like, the only thing I can say is she's not living with us anymore." Yeah. It's such a scary thing, because as a child, I was never raised this way. So that's why this is uncharted territory.
Uncharted territory.
Because my parents had answers to everything.
Yeah.
They're in heaven with God, or they're in the spirit life, or whatever it was. And it always brought me this comfort, like, oh, everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. But now what I'm doing is I don't know, pulling the curtain down and saying, guess what? I don't know. And I don't have good, solid answers. I wish I did. I'm still trying to find the good, solid answers for myself. And screw that. I would like the answers for myself, sure. But what I want more than anything is to be able to provide those solid answers for my kids. Because I know that's what my parents were trying to give me with whatever form of Mormonism, to give you those answers of, oh no, your pet dog's up in heaven, it'll right. It's fine, or whatever. But this is scary,
bro. You just got to the freaking center of the biggest difference in parenting, and really in my approach to life, right there between Mormonism and beyond Mormonism, and I include ex-Mormonism in that, because what I had both as a Mormon as an ex-Mormon were answers. It was always answers to certain questions, right? And then Mormonism, why are you here? Where'd you come from? Where are you going?
Right.
I was thinking just about how small, linear, and egoist Mormon doctrine is. Because you're a thing separate from all other things for eternity going backwards, and for eternity going forwards. You are always this ego, this separate thing. And with that approach, it had all the answers to including answers to questions that nobody has the answers to. And then the opposite has been, once I finally, I should say, then ex-Mormonism became, I have answers, not that. That's my answer.
Mm-hmm.
Church bad, Jesus bad, scriptures bad. It was not that. Those were just as much answers as when I was a Mormon.
Just taking the 180 degree
right.
Wait, yeah.
And it's taken a while to get to the place of just the opposite, which is, rather than having answers, I want questions. And that's been the biggest leap of faith, is in giving my kids permission to ask questions. And that's one of the things I just had a conversation with Tommy, 20 years old. He's a junior trying to figure out, changing major and the, real life stuff, right. At 20. And it's just been so exciting to, as he's trying to find an answer to, to a stage in life and that will impact his life in real and substantial ways and he's coming to us for advice now. What do you think? And, trying to go through pros and cons and all this. And my advice was, stop. You're 20 years old. Do less. You don't need the answers right now. In fact, ask more questions. Give yourself time and space to ask more questions. Not what do I want to do, but why do I want to do? Right? And at 20, give yourself time. And that's that right there. The difference between having answers and wanting, and even when I think I have the answers, and in many cases right now at this point, finally, I do feel that I have answers for me and for my children. Now that I actually have them, it's in not presenting them. It's in not offering them. And instead simply asking questions and encouraging them to ask questions and having the confidence that they'll get to an even better answer than I have. And more than likely, it's going to be a very similar or same answer because my answer to his question is a lot more broad. What do you want to do in life? What do you want to be in life? The answer to that question is live with peace. Do something that is valuable to you, something that serves you. That's the answer to that question. And so in not answering that question, instead of encouraging questions, he's getting there on his own. And there's now comfort in the question and comfort in not having answers, in having faith that will actually lead to the answer. The whole thing, quit trying. Once you stop trying, you do it. Do less. Stop trying to surf and surf.
Is it because the answers to these big questions really are just subjective? They're
personal. Fuck yes.
Personal. And because the thing
individual.
It's really interesting to me when I talk to my kids now, when they'll bring up, like, oh, so-and-so's Jewish, and then we talk about the Jewish faith and, whether they're, dogmatic or not, or orthodox or whatever it is, and say it doesn't really matter, but the way they view things, you respect how they view it. It always comes back to, are they harming you? Are they harming themselves? If the answers are no, then respect their choice and their journey all the way. And because that's what you want, right? You want to be able to figure things out, believe what you want to believe or not believe or whatever it is. And it's going to require trust and respect that we let people have their journeys.
Absolutely. Including and especially our kids.
Oh, absolutely. But it's still a delicate thing because it's I know you and I have talked about this before because I'm having recollections of this. When you see them on a path, you can take simple things like if they're messing up a math problem, you're like, oh, you just didn't put the decimal point in the right place right here. Do you want them to fail that quiz or whatever, or do you want to show it to like right there, that you fix that? Or it's like, make sure you're wearing your gloves and boots when you go out because it's cold outside. Or do you let them just, I want to wear my shorts and tank top, it's fine. There's still things that you want to be able to say, okay, I don't want to sound like I'm controlling, but you think this through. I can give you some perspective because I watched the weather report, so you're going to want to put something on.
Dude, you're yes. And those two examples I think are great. Is there's a difference in approach. You can be right about both of those things. Your decimal point's wrong, and it's it's too cold for you to dress that way because of your comfort, safety, all those things, right? So, but to say, here's the answer, there's where you made the mistake, and here's how to correct it, whether it's not an effective way to do it, rather than helping them see the error on their own so they can correct it on their own. What I hear you saying is, our job as a parent is to help make the child aware of as many things as possible, as many real things as possible. And so then Chris and I literally just had the example of the coat, the cold weather with our niece when we were traveling up north with her, and she was wearing short shorts and a t-shirt, and I was pretty bundled up because we were up north. And we said, "Hey, you want to bring a jacket?" "No, I'm fine." "Oh, and flip-flops." "Well, honey, it's a little cold. We're up in Flagstaff. Are you sure you don't want to bring a jacket?" "No, I'm fine." And Kristen and I kind of started pushing. Finally, we said, "You know what? She's aware of it now. She's made a decision. We'll go out." And she was fine. Now, had she not been fine, she would have figured that out on her own. But she was aware of it and then was able to make a decision. I simply will not adopt no, you're going to do this. Now, there are stages where, no, you're going to do this because this really has to, but now I'm going to explain why. This really has to do with your safety, your this, right?
Yeah, there's still boundaries.
There's
right?
gotta be. There's gotta be. And the analogy that we've been doing lately, we've been dealing with this puppy. We just got this Australian Shepherd that's very rambunctious, and in fact, we were just having this conversation with a friend yesterday about their kids, and we were talking about the dog. How really all you got to do is provide them food, exercise, love, and a small enough space so that they don't shit and piss everywhere. Right? Because if you give them too big of a space, right, they're just going to destroy things. So you got to give them that small space. And then the other thing you have to do with dogs is also give them a space and give them some things that they can chew on and destroy.
Yeah.
And so if you give your kids, start there and say you give your kids those things and just those things, and let them decide a lot of things within that. How much to eat, what to eat, where that space is going to be, what things they can't, that they'd like to destroy and chew on. Then you can prevent them from chewing on your shoes and your shit, and prevent them from pissing and shitting everywhere. And so the same approach applies with kids. But in my experience, one of two things happens. Either parents are too permissive and let their kids shit and piss everywhere and chew on too much stuff, or they put them in a cage and they don't give them enough free range exercise, love, and ability to make decisions on their own.
A lot of those extreme examples, they're out there for sure. I mean, as you guys probably know, you've probably met parents that are on both sides of the spectrum there. I do too.
I just don't think they're extremes. I think there is a sweet spot.
Well, yeah.
Right. So I think this too permissive stuff and the too restrictive, I guess, those are probably the most common approaches. And it's something I've personally seen. I've seen it in our lives as we went from more restrictive to perhaps too permissive from a believing to a non-believing context. And so in breaking through Mormonism or existing and parenting beyond Mormonism, one of the things that we did is impose some more. We made sure that they have in some cases a more confined world. We try to make their world as safe and as large as possible, given their development, not their age, given their development. Yeah. And the idea of safety versus largeness is too often it seems like inconsistencies, right? How can I make the world safe? How can I give them access to things? Or if I make them so if I let them explore and I make their world large, well, if I keep them safe, how do I vice versa? But it's that balance of understanding their level of development that I think helps them not, and here again, it's not putting them, helps them figure out for themselves how large their world is and ensure that they're safe there.
Mm-hmm.
The kids are going to make their world large if we're too restrictive. They're going to do it by hiding. They're going to do it in more destructive ways. They're going to find other ways to break out of a very, very restrictive world that's imposed on them by adults.
But that's an easy statement, because it's like, think about when you were when you were around that age, you wanted independence, you wanted freedom, you didn't want to be constrained, you didn't want all these rules.
Yeah.
I mean, I can still remember all that stuff vividly. I imagine most people do. So yeah, exactly.
Well, and I think I would have been better off had I been given a little more freedom. Had I been given, had they been responsive and really communicating me, just like you talked about with your daughter, and doing that on all the areas that I wanted to maybe push on. Okay, let's have a conversation about that. Why? What do you want to stay out till 1? What are you doing till 1? And actually, my parents did have the conversation, although they could have, there was a little more. No, it's just not going to happen. But because all my friends are doing it. Oh, if all your friends did it, would you jumped off a wood?
Right.
No, you're not hearing me. What I'm saying is, I have the desire to be social. It's important to me to have this social experience, Mom and Dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what kids are saying when they're saying, well, I want to do this. So, anyway, yeah, I but that's also, again, been the difference. The difference in parenting has been the openness and responsiveness to what the kid is experiencing and wants. Tell me about your world. Tell me why you want to do this. Explain it to me. In those situations where I either see a problem, I'm unhappy with the direction, or I think that there's something that is either destructive, unhealthy, But again, the awareness of why do I care about this is the first question I ask myself. Why do I care about this? Oh, I'm really annoyed. I'm annoyed. I'm bothered that I shouldn't care about it. They're having fun. They're laughing. They're doing these things, and it's 8:00 at night. It's fine. Why do I care?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So that's the first question. And then if I care, let's go have a conversation with the kids. Look, I care. I care enough to get up. I care enough to say something. I'm now burning calories. Let me explain to you why, because I've identified it. Now you tell me why I'm wrong. I think we do that, or I should say that's been the biggest difference. And that's tied to having questions rather than answers. So I ask questions rather than provide direction, answers, or directions or directives.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more cautious about doing that and realizing that every time I do that, once I'm imposing my will on them, I'm now in the realm of Mormonism. I'm in the realm of fundamentalism. I'm in the realm of behaving as if I am their leader.
Yeah, you're controlling and restricting, and yep.
And again, the shift of that approach has been instructed by by the way I just view my kids, and now it's go back to the adoption. And I've told you the story. We've talked about this, and I'm going to disclose it, which is, a couple of years ago, my oldest, she's an adult, told us that she resented us for adopting her, and it was a nut punch, not a gut punch. It was, it brought me to my knees.
Absolutely. How would it not?
And we struggled with that and eventually got to the place where she's right. She's right to resent us because she said, you took me from my family. You stole me from my family. And the circumstances didn't matter. This was her experience. And the reflection of she's right caused me to realize this. Just as I resent my parents for forcing me down a path that wasn't my path, they treated me as an extension of the family, an extension of them, an extension of the church. But similarly, I treated this little girl as an extension of her birth family and an extension of us. And it was tied to our, being sealed, and those types of things reinforced that. And just a couple years ago, and realizing, my gosh, not only was she not ours, but she also wasn't her birth family's. She was and is and remains hers. And the regret that I felt, the repentance that I wanted to do, was that approach in not treating Tori as a being unto herself. And it was in that moment that assisted me to shift and have that exact same approach to the other two children who were our biological children. And so we stopped, or at least made some concerted efforts to not treat them as if they're extensions of us or extensions of the family. And it was in that moment that I saw it's what enabled me to ultimately go to my father and go to my mother and forgive them for being loving, good parents and doing the best they could under the paradigm that they were brought up. I mean, it's a silly thing to have to feel that you forgive your parents for. But that's what the experience was, because I understood very, very intimately the decisions that we made to adopt that girl came from a place of love and good faith. And despite that love and good faith and all those intentions, the reality that adoption had on her, but not just the adoption, the manner in which we treated her as an extension of us. And that was my bridge to seeing the way that my parents, doing their best, treated me as an extension of us. And so all I could do at that point was acknowledge and forgive myself for what I did to her from a place of love, and appreciate what my parents tried to do for me from a place of love. And it was in that moment that I can say I came full circle and now believe the church is true. And let me explain that. Because I realized that as it relates to my father, especially, who lost his parents when he was 18 and 19 years old. And he converted. So his parents weren't members. He converted. He was the only member of his family to convert. And then he went on a mission. And he lost his parents right in the period of time that he converted and went on a mission. The church became his salvation. The church became a thing for him to have family, and a thing to guide him to be a parent, because he didn't have a father, to teach him how to be a father, to model how to be a father, and certainly not a father of now adult kids. He didn't get that. And so what I feel now is an appreciation for the church of being there at a time when my father needed it. Just as, and that was our experience with this adoption, is I'm not going to curse adoption generally, even though I think it has there's some real issues, and there's some real issues with adoption and the way we do it.
Sure.
But I'm not going to curse it and say that was a horrible thing, because we did the best we could under the circumstances, and we came from a place of love. But again, all that was all wrapped up in my Mormon experience, my experience as a kid, my experience as a father, to simply want to be me, and want to be me independent of everyone else and everything else. And wanting that more than anything else for my kids. Separate and independent from me. And it was that experience, that gut-wrenching just tragedy, that shifted my approach, and starting to, again, this is where I say have faith, have this abandon of actually treating my kids and giving my kids more space and more say-so in the things that they do in their life. And it was hard, bro. It was scary AF, as the kids say.
Yeah. Well, what you're scratching on is, I mean, first of all, I don't like talking about parenting at all because I feel like I'm the most inadequate parent that I know of. So I always hate talking about it.
Well, shit, if that's the case, who's the adequate ones?
That being said, I love hearing your guys' experiences, and I actually devour other people's experiences. So why am I going to devalue my experience over others? So if I have experiences that I can share that can help others, then that's my obligation. So, but what you were just talking about, this, if I were to give like one piece of advice to anyone out there, inside, outside of Mormonism, inside whatever faith, doesn't really matter. It really comes down to what you were just talking about, treating them as individuals. But in order to really do that effectively, it's going to require so much trust on both ends. You're going to have to trust that child. That child is going to need to trust you. And so in order for that to happen, there's a lot of things and a lot of work that needs, a lot of groundwork, a lot of things that need to be done for that child to trust you. Now, there's really cool benchmarks that a parent can realize when they're being successful at achieving trust from that child. Like, and I hate to, brag about this, but when my youngest daughter called me from school today, having a really hard time telling me about this issue that came up that brought up a lot of emotions for her, even though it was really inconvenient for me because, I'm in the middle of working on my car or whatever. But when I realized it was her, I stopped everything and I listened to everything she had to say, even if objectively it's really superficial and kind of dumb. Most people are like, really? So he stole your pencil, blah, 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 or whatever it was.
Right.
But I listened to her, and then I was there for her. And then after, I tried to help calm her down, I hung up the phone, and I actually did choke up a little bit, knowing that when she's having a hard time, she thought of me, to go to me first. That's when you know that you're not a failure, I guess. You're not a success as a parent, but you're not a failure, but at least you're getting those levels of trust and support kind of built in. And that's going to become so instrumental when they get older. Because if they get, like with my oldest, when she trusts me, and she can, and I know I laid out a lot of groundwork, especially coming out to her as an unbeliever, and then her and I walking this path together, essentially. I mean, she still has her path, I still have mine. But because there's so many commonalities that we have these bonds, and so she will come to me in moments of panic and, where she's scared and worried, just like what Tommy did with you guys, where he's like, I'm in a crossroads here. This is life is now staring me right in the face. Big decision time. And what's more important than for a parent to say, I'm here for you. I will support you. I'm not going to tell you what to do because you are you, but I want to be there for you in every way possible.
Yeah. And, the advice that I give, and the thing that I try to practice and try to embody is first and foremost, do less. I stop. I try to do nothing until I have clarity, until I'm certain something needs to be done. I love the Rick and Morty thing about time and how, it's so necessary for stability to be certain. And how very few people are certain. But especially when it comes to intervening with a kid, I do nothing. I try to do nothing until I'm certain. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is, the thing I try to do is simply give them opportunities to be heard, to communicate. because so few things are in their control, so few things are in our control. And in acknowledging that and in understanding that, my goal isn't to really give them control over situations. In fact, it's to not try to give them false control or think they can control situations they can't, but instead to be free to talk about it, whatever they're going on, whatever is going on, because in them talking about it and giving them voice, it's getting them to self-navigate and process in the talking about it. And that's what caused them to land on, I think, a good option. I hate to say the good option is there's only one. And that's such a Mormon, God, please tell me what the right choice is.
Right.
And again, I think that's so egoist, as if there's a right choice. I think there are so many right choices and there are a number of wrong choices, right? But usually what we do is we end up with a wrong choice in trying to find the one and only true answer to whatever the issue is. And so it's to try to get them used to and comfortable and practicing talking about what they're going through. And this is kind of a revelation now as I've gotten older, especially as Tommy's gotten into college and be 20 years old, because he was a kid riddled with anxiety. And there was a period of time where we were really, really concerned. And he had vocal tics, and he had he was ticking, and it got very severe for a period of time. And it's really Kristen's trip. It's a tribute to Kristen, is that what she really did and taught was is giving him at an early age the opportunity, the space, and the freedom and the safety to express himself and start communicating what he's experienced and what he's going through. And over time, that led to his own awareness and identification of the stressful situations that come up. And now to hear him at only 20, he's only 20, man. I'm so impressed with this kid, is to hear him. Well, I know this is what's going on, and I'm frustrated because, and I understand it's not, and to have him work through that on his own is simply a manifestation. It's a more advanced move of what he was allowed to do at 5, 6, 7, 8 of just, I hate this, letting him start to do that and not restrict him. Well, shut up, quit yelling, quit. Behave, kind of stuffing that energy that was really emanating. And so that's one that's been an example that has been life-saving in his life. And now we've seen it with Dylan. She's now 15. That's happened earlier and earlier. Her strength and her power in voicing to not just us, but to other people in her world what she's dealing with and what she's experiencing, especially when that person is treating her poorly. And I'm specifically talking about adults. So it's been with Tommy, it was a mitigating and a very healing aspect in being able to communicate his world. And for Dylan, it's been not just a healing one, it's been an empowering one. And as I think as a girl that's had that's been a tool and a resiliency tool that's been very effective. But it's something that can be done in any familial situation. I heard Kristen give somebody great advice just yesterday about dealing with their kids is, just ask questions and listen. Do nothing but that. Have you tried that? Just ask questions and listen. And the person said, no, I haven't. That's just one place to start with whatever age kid we deal with. Ask more questions and listen. Ask more questions and listen, and do less, impose less. Again, that comes full circle to the biggest difference between parenting as a believer, parenting as a non-believer, and now finally parenting beyond Mormonism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you were saying. Ask questions, listen, ask questions, and it's reiterating the fact that we treat these children, and I even want to say, even when they're really young, treat them as they're individuals.
Yeah.
Treat them as they're their own people. They're not clay for you to mold.
Right.
They're not little people that you need to form into some ideal that you want to be, or like a little mini you. Like, oh, I wasn't successful at playing football, but I'm going to raise my boy so he'll be successful. And then you get to be that sports dad saying, he's living the life I should have lived.
Right.
And that's like, no, just let him or her do whatever they're passionate with.
When you were when you left, and especially when there was kind of a mixed faith marriage, did you feel the drive or the need to kind of impose a non-believer perspective and fear that you had to kind of counterbalance any indoctrination that was going on? And how did you find that to work?
Yeah, good question. Most certainly, I felt, because early on you feel like there's so many negatives or destructive things that are taught in the church, and you want to either deprogram that or unbrainwash them or whatever it is. You feel that really palpable early on. But the funny thing is, who was it? I think it was a friend of mine that had told me, hey, you went, 35 years in the church or whatever, and you're fine. So if they go 2 years, 4 years, 10 years in the church, they can still be fine. It's not like if a young girl goes through the young women's program, she's beyond that point of figuring things out for herself. There are shortcomings that can happen. There are things that could be planted deeply in her brain or whatever that could be problematic later on, but maybe not. It's hard, because all I can what I will say is, yeah, I did feel that, but what I eventually came down to is, I'm just going to offer my perspective the way I thought, but bring at it the way you learn. Like, this is why I believe, this is why I think the way I think. These are the things that I've come to use as my foundation moving forward. Take it or leave it.
Dude, I've been thinking the difference between a preacher and a Zen master. And a Zen master, preachers can always say, gonna direct. Let me tell you how to do it, and here's things you need to know. Whereas a Zen master may tell their story and then just ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
And in telling your story, that's going to provide more advice and more counsel for anybody, really, but especially a kid who loves you, to be able to do their own work and apply your story to their experience. And so, that's what I always hear. I've heard you say this before. Is this has been my experience, but I'm going to let you have yours. And in my experience that's been negative, my experience that's been positive, both of those things that may have given me insight into certain things, but this has been my experience. What do you?
Well, and one of the big reasons why I do that so consciously is because I was a product of being controlled and molded.
Yeah.
It took me till my 30s before I really needed to shape my own identity, think for myself, figure things out for myself, rather than, taking, like I said, take the scaffolding down and then build my own up. And so I do make a very conscious effort, making sure that I am not preaching or controlling, because I have such an aversion to that now.
Yeah. There's so many many ways that I feel Mormon again, now that I've kind of broken through Mormonism and ex-Mormonism.
Sure, of course.
Because there were so many aspects of my childhood that were so healthy and so filled with love.
Yeah.
Tied to things in the church. And, you know, well, yeah, and one of them is some of the scripture stories. I had a very Christocentric view of, you know, the whole hippie Jesus thing. And there was a part of that. There was so much of those stories that I found so elevating and so inspiring. And, you know, the poor wayfaring man of grief and these types of things just encourage goodness in me. And I rejected that so completely, you know, it feeling necessary. That was a necessary rejection, and kind of re-embracing those things, not as literal historical events or magical beings, but as allegory, has been so much fun, and it's been so helpful in communicating concepts that I want to with my kids. And rather than preaching, just telling stories. And now they'll, you know, it's been fun to tell, you know, incorporate stories from the Bible with stories from movies, with stories from books, with Star Wars, and ultimately realize all these stories tend to be saying the same thing.
Yeah, so many commonalities everywhere.
It's the hero's journey. It's figure out what's right for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether you're talking about that or whether you're talking about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Right.
Everybody can wear the mask. Yeah. Thanks, man.
No, thank you. This was awesome.
You've been listening to If and Stamp Those.